sex, drugs, and penises will most likely not be featured in this video. I saw a post recently on X telling me that I had 3 seconds to hook viewers watching a video on YouTube. Now, personally, I'm above cheap gimmicks,
Sex!
tricks,
Sex!
and stupidity.
Sex!
I have no idea if that worked, but on the topic of YouTube, provided I didn't just make everyone unfollow me, thank you new and old subscribers for 1,000 here on YouTube. I passed that with my last upload. Yeah! Look man, I got small channel dreams and we're close to YouTube partner, so maybe one day I can afford a potato with YouTube earnings. 1,000 was the hard part, and in celebration, I thought I'd walk you all down memory lane and talk about the 20 most fun games to me. These are games in chronological order in my life that I played an ungodly amount of hours of and have enjoyed the most. And Cloud, maybe we shouldn't say that to the new subscribers here. That's kind of awkward. Anyway, I figured I would generally talk about why I like them so much instead of just repeating the same old facts that everybody knows and has heard of already, like release date, developer, and that kind of stuff. Hope you enjoy, and thank you for giving my little channel a chance. In Dragon Seeds on the PlayStation 1, you spend a lot of time buying Fast Weed, and Vigor Herb, and Iron Weed, and wait a second, those are drugs! You know what? We're just gonna full commit before we go any further down on this list. So here's your penis, a la Super Mario Bros. 3. Dragon Seeds was a really fun and pretty forgotten game. Most of the time when I mention Dragon Seeds, no one's ever heard of it, and honestly the base game itself isn't anything too special. You'll spend a lot of time between static screens, cutting candles, while raising stats for your dragon. But where the game really was cool was the battle mode. You had to use your dragon in battle through the rankings in multiple arenas. The thing though is this game had a neat little player versus player mode, and that's where a lot of my time went with friends. This was almost pre-internet, so you could use your dragons to fight against each other if you both had Dragon Seed saves on 2 different memory cards. I would raise a few dragons after school without the week, and we would battle all weekend amidst a bunch of pizza, coke, and sleepovers. Sometimes we'll playing another random game rented from Blockbuster. Genuinely fun times in the epitome of the 1990s. Sleepover and couch co-op after baseball or hockey. I definitely miss the days of mindless fun with friends and all the horribly cringe named dragons we had trying to beat each other up. I think overall, this game is alright. It might be the only game on the list where I don't think you're actually missing anything in particular if you choose not to try it, but still, in terms of sheer hours that went into playing it with friends, I logged a ton. Milon's Secret Castle is a perfect example of how as a kid you're incredibly ignorant to arguably bad game design. The game itself is titular in the sense there are secrets everywhere, but a lot of the time you're guided by vague hints that make no sense due to English, and some of what you're expected to deduce or find is nearly impossible without luck. I spent countless hours trying to make sense of this game and where to go, and ultimately I had no idea how to do anything. I got just as far as past the well as a kid, but it was still fun because this was really a different kind of video game. It kind of felt like everything could be possible in this game because so much was hidden and unclear. What's insanely cool is some of the design years later going back, appreciating it as an adult who is definitely aware of arguably bad game design by now. I think Milon gets a bad rap, but for example, the music in the bonus games you find more hidden note blocks actually unlocks more of like an orchestra in the background. What you've been listening to is a progressive adaptive bonus song after finding more and more instruments, and here's what it sounds like when you found them all. I really like this game, but it's also hard to recommend, especially without a guide, but I think the game perfectly encompassed exploring pre-internet without having everything spoiled to you because nobody knew anything about it to begin with. I don't think it's a hot take these days, but I do think the Super Nintendo port of Turtles in Time is better than the arcade original. You want to know the best part about Turtles in Time? You can abbreviate it to TIT. Although, that's weird and singular. I guess we also have the Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky. I hope you appreciate the absolute stupidity of this opening line. I did think way too hard about all that. Anyway, fun with friends or fun alone, this game is perpetual mindless fun. The soundtrack lives absolutely rent-free in my head, and this game is secretly a fighting game in disguise with how you can move the turtles around. Each turtle is different in terms of damage, speed, and health, and I rented this game infinitely as a kid. This was easily one of my most rented games. I don't know why my parents never bought it. I love playing it so much, and even as an adult, I still never bought it. I've still actually never owned a copy to this day. If you happen to follow me on Twitch, years ago, Sewer Surfin' was my first follow alert, and the Pizza Monster episode of the cartoon shown where the meatballs turned into those aliens still give me nightmares to this day. If you haven't played it in a while, you want to feel old? We're now past the era in which Neon Knight Riders was set, 2020 AD. Kids now playing this game will think this game was set in the past. This is maybe the first game on the list starting from here where I've beat it over and over and over, and I still periodically return to play it. There's really not much else more to say specifically about this one. It's just plain fun. SimCity almost makes me want to cry when I reflect on why I like this game, as it really kind of messes with my head when it comes to the concept of time and life passing before your eyes. I felt like a grown-up as a kid when I played it back then, getting to build a city and imagining what being a grown-up must be like. And now as an adult playing it, it reminds me of how much I enjoyed my time with it playing it as a kid. The music in this game is one of the themes of my childhood, and there was something very wholesome as a kid playing this game, caring about your citizens and wanting the best for them in their imaginary lives. Imagining what work as an adult is like, what the future might hold, and everything in between. I think this is one of the first games that, probably looking back on it, I'm sure I made terrible decisions in managing the lives of others. But I really did try to be the best mayor possible to give everyone the best lives possible by building the best city possible. I think it just shows as a testament to game design how strong this game is almost 40 years later. When I went through it recently, I tried to get 500,000 for population. A large part of the time when I went through it streaming, a bunch of people were imagining funny scenarios related to high crime rates and traffic, much like I constantly imagined everything as a kid. In that playthrough, I finally got the elusive Mario statue and a boat immediately ran into it after. This is still a game I love playing, and I would like to hit 600,000 population the next time I go through it. 500k was really tough and on my bucket list to try to beat forever. Just remember, if you want to maximize population, destroy all hospitals and schools. Speaking of imagination, Bucky O'Hare growing up was actually a weird experience for me. I had absolutely no idea it was based off a toy line, it had action figures made about it, or a cartoon or comics existed at all. I always kind of assumed it was a unique Konami intellectual property. Bucky is the first game I can really remember feeling lost in the universe when it comes to imagining what the different planets must have felt like to live on or travel to. The ice planet, well, that's basically like Canada anyway, so more so the yellow planet, the red planet, and the green planet. I spent hours imagining what they would be like to travel to live on, and maybe all the weird creatures that the game didn't show you. I also think I really strongly resonate with this game because I remember it being one of the first soundtracks I would just listen to. Sometimes I would load up Blue Planet, Red or Green, and just leave the NES on. I always thought personally the Bucky soundtrack was one of the biggest contenders for me for the best soundtrack on the NES. I never ended up beating this game as a kid, as it was pretty hard, and when I started streaming it was within the first 10 games I ever beat on stream. I since went back to beat it on hard mode, which if you're unfamiliar is an anti-piracy mode that can trigger by entering the password hard with an exclamation point at the beginning of the game. It turns all damage into instant death. I currently have second place in this category, and the run I finished a long time ago has 0 accidental deaths. I've always loved this game, and it's still one I regularly return to over and over throughout the years. Speaking also of imagination, this next game was part of the Literal Imagination series, and oh boy, you thought Bucky was kind of obscure? Let's talk about Genghis Khan 2, Clan of the Grey Wolf on the Super Nintendo. Koei and the SNES era originally released a ton of historical simulation and turn-based strategy games. The amount of time that I put into playing this game and eventually beating it was ungodly, and the amount of time that anyone ever played this game with me is so little that I can probably count the hours on one hand. It is easily the most unpopular co-op game I've ever tried to get anyone to play with me, but my brain massively misses the days of old turn-based strategy games before they all became real-time strategy, much like StarCraft. There's not much to really say about this game as it takes forever to beat, and it's basically like an overglorified game of Risk. The soundtrack also lives rent-free in my head, and if you really want a deep cut, if you check on romhacking.net, and if you look up Genghis Khan 2 hacks, I think I was the only person that ever created a hack for this game in hopes that other people would one day finally enjoy multiplayer. I love it that much. The hilarious part is if you do the math, 1,015 have downloaded the hack since December 13th, 2012. That means 1/5 of a person downloads that hack every day. It shows how unpopular these games must have been, but regardless, I spent hours on them. Truly great old strategy games that have a great gameplay loop. And if you want an easier turn-based strategy game by Koei, check out Gemfire. If you want one that's harder with deeper mechanics, check out Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And if you want something that's almost impossible to comprehend, Celtic Tales, Balor of the Evil Eye on the PC. I think I grew up in a PlayStation 1 PSYOP as a kid, as I never really experienced much of the N64. In fact, I only knew one person that had an N64 here, as everybody else had PS1s. But I went through 120 stars on Mario 64 on stream and beat it last year. I ended up having a phenomenally great time. I can totally understand why people fell in love with this game on the N64 when it came out on the N64. And yeah, sometimes insane camera issues aside, where it really wanted me to look into a corner as Mario, the movement in this game is extraordinarily fun. I can also understand why over time it ended up growing to be one of the bigger speedrunning communities. I thoroughly enjoyed trying to find all 120 stars, and even though it took me over 30 hours, I did find all 120. Having absolutely no childhood nostalgia for Mario 64, it immediately jumped to the top of my list of both Mario games and video games in general I would like to replay again in the future. so the pull of this game was very strong and my first impression of it was honestly very high. I'm not even a huge Mario fan per se, as I don't ever really feel the need like I want to go back and play a Mario game casually over and over, but Mario 64 is wildly good because I think it hit a bunch of unique notes other Mario games never hit all together at once for me. The depth of movement, the game's openness and freedom, exploration, secrets, replayability, and potential speedrunning appeal. I really enjoyed Mario 64 a lot, much more than I thought that I ever would. Mega Man X, in my opinion, holds up to be one of the best games on the Super Nintendo. I ended up getting this one for a birthday present shortly after it came out, and it blew my mind away as the only other Mega Man experience I had before that was Mega Man 1. I think in retrospect, what was so brilliant in X's design was the fact that maybe this was the first game that I played that rewarded replayability in a platformer specifically. And Mega Man X, whether or not you want to, rewards you for learning how to dash or move better, and it's a very reward-driven design loop. The game just genuinely becomes better the better that you are at the game. The cool part though is outside of the Hadouken and all the hidden power-ups, there's no additional characters and such to unlock. So the only reason that you could or would come back to X to play it again is to improve your overall skill at the game. And as I said, the better that you can play this game, the more fun it becomes, and I think that's just how strong this game was designed, because the first time that I beat it, I died hundreds of times. I really think this is my first experience when I think back on it with a game that really put such a complicated emphasis on perfecting movement. It was so different than other platforming games, and I would find myself periodically returning to X again and again just because I wanted to get better at it, and up until then, I never really had that pull from a video game before. Not to mention, the music is also fantastic, and one of my oldest friends on Twitch, Tinu, always confused Zero and thought Zero was a girl. I also thought Zero was always a girl growing up as a kid. Anyone else think that Zero was a girl? I've since learned Mega Man X and the skill ceiling is infinite in the speedrun as well. There's always something to perfect. The movement was so well designed and addicting to perfect, so I feel that's true in the speedrun, and it's also true casually. You could basically return this game for an entire lifetime and always find something to improve a little bit each time, making for a fantastic loop as it's so genuinely fun to play. I originally went through Super Ghouls and Ghosts and enjoyed everything about it last year. It was the first time I experienced any game from that franchise and would massively recommend Super Ghouls and Ghosts, as I went through on Professional Mode, 1cc, and Stock Lives. I ended up playing a fan game after based on the WonderSwan original called Ghosts and Demons, and holy man, this might be one of the most fun I've had with a blind playthrough in my entire life. Ghosts and Demons kicks you in the balls, and once you're on the ground because you got kicked in the balls, it kicks you again in the balls for good measure. I can beat the first loop within 19 minutes, and the least amount of deaths I've had is 4. It's a perfect blend of execution and RNG, reaction time, and difficulty. All the design choices are spot on, and the absolute insane thing to me is the entire fan game is made by one dude. The solo developer absolutely knocked this out of the park. Support the developer as the game is worth it, and it's just so well done. I have no affiliation with the developer, and I've never met the developer, so there's no sponsorship or anything there. It's easily one of the best feeling games I've ever played in a long time in terms of controls, and the difficulty was just genuinely fun getting to the end of the game, beating the first loop. I still haven't been able to beat the second loop as it's really hard, but the game is just an incredible challenge. I feel I'm really good at video games, and the fact that this one gives me so much trouble makes it all the more appealing. Sutte Hakkun was a Japanese exclusive logic puzzle game that was released on the Satallaview, and it combines two genres almost never really combined: logic and puzzle, and precision and platformer. The game requires some pretty tough platforming and execution later on, so the movement's actually being near pixel perfect. It's pretty hard to talk in depth about this game, but the puzzles get brain-bustingly difficult and require some serious thought on top of, again, precise execution. If you have any interest in either of these genres, just try it out. One of the most underrated puzzle games and logic games of all time in my opinion, and I can't do it justice. Like, just try this game out. There's even a fan translation available. This is one game that's almost never streamed, or almost never played, almost never talked about, and just people miss out on experiencing it. It's got such a charming art style, and it's one of the first puzzle games I actually tried to beat. Such a great game. Breath of Fire 3 came out at a real cool time for me, as imagine this. Some stores didn't sell PlayStation 1 RPGs yet, at least not over here, as they were actually pretty uncommon. I had to make a custom order from a store here called CompuSmart that had to custom ship it to me. Breath of Fire 3 was one of the first games that I bought with my own money, and it was one of the first universes that I got sucked completely into. I love the colors, the art style, and the characters, and it also came out during the perfect time as well. It was right when people were starting to use the internet more, but not everything had been spoiled yet. I actually have super vague memories of posting once every few days on an old fan-made message board about the game, asking questions about masters or how to traverse the desert, as the only real internet access I had back then was whenever my mom took me to her work. So, maybe once a week, I would check the post again, and someone would reply. I was actually able to traverse the desert back then by writing down someone's reply. Breath of Fire 3 was a great little universe, and it was fun to explore when it came out, and I spent a lot of time in the fairy village. From the totally unhinged dolphin to Maria herself, the game remains a very memorable experience to me and really started solidifying my love for the RPG genre as a whole. Contra 3 kicked my ass when I went through it in hard mode last year, 1 CC on stock lives. I absolutely, minus the top-down levels, love this game. The top-down levels are, but the rest of Contra 3 as a whole, I think from start to finish, was another great game in terms of difficulty on the hardest difficulty settings. It took me over 20 hours to beat and learn, and I choked on the final boss many times. I think it places up so high on this list, even though I only played this one as an adult, because it was again deeply rewarding. I think to me there's a very fine line between hard and frustrating and designed well and challenging, and Contra 3 struck all the right notes. Every time I made progress, it was because I clawed my way there, and beating the game also felt very rewarding at the end. I feel in a sea of games, both new and old, very few have that kind of feeling attached to it anymore for me. I also think what's great about Contra 3 and Super Ghouls and Ghosts is until you've probably learned the speedrun stuff, consistency in these games is actually really hard. I can still beat it in about 30 minutes on the hardest levels, but there's going to be some tragedy along the way. And I really like that design where, on a casual level, it's just very hard to replicate that first kind of W. It makes it really fun to come back to in a way that's also different from Mega Man X, as it's not so much about perfecting how you control, but just trying to get better at reactions and everything overall. Extremely rewarding game, especially on hard mode. So, Breath of Fire 3, Contra 3, and now we have Exile 3. 3 games with 3 in the title. What are the odds? I'll forgive you if you've never heard of Exile 3 before, but it's a wickedly deep RPG game that was developed by one guy named Jeff Vogel from Spiderweb Software. Exile 3 was one of my first experiences to a light morality system where if you strolled into town and killed a townsman, guess what? Town got pissed off and angry at you. This RPG world, for an RPG at the time, was massive, and there was so much to explore and figure out. It's one of the first RPGs that really stuck in my mind that was almost kind of like a grown-up RPG for grown-ups, where it wasn't aimed for a kid, which was a cool thought to me. There wasn't anything specifically kid-friendly about the visuals, universe, and there was people who experienced real consequences, and there was blood, and people sometimes died. It made me feel a lot more connected to the world than any RPG up until that point. It made me think about my actions, like killing an animal in a town, knowing that the town would get angry and try to kill me, or stealing if somebody could see me. I guess the morality system kind of kept me in check, as a result, the game always stayed in my mind and wanting to explore it more as an adult. When I went through it as an adult, I was blown away by the size and scope of this game and everything it had to offer the player going through it. If you can look past the graphics, this one is a sleeper, and if your name is Retro Island Gaming on Twitch, you should play it at the recommendation of one of your dear Canadian streamer friends. Final Fantasy III. Okay, I promise this wasn't intentional at this point. Final Fantasy III on Super Nintendo anyway, or 6 nowadays, is the first game that made me cry. It was the first game that made me feel furious anger and unbelievable depths of empathy for Celis. I felt all kinds of complicated emotions for video game characters, where up until that point in my life, never stemmed that deep towards any character in a video game before. I respect Final Fantasy III as an overall package, and I'll try to keep it spoiler free, but if you've played this game you know. Cyan, Celis, Leo Kefka, Taro, and Shadow were all things that chipped away at my heart. Going through it as an adult, some of the scenes I had seen many times over destroyed me in new ways because I've grown older and experienced new life experiences. What holds true to me is just how malleable the quotes in this game are at various points in your life. Keeping it super brief, I suffered massive trauma and depression to the point I really struggled with suicide in 2019. Shadow, at one point in the game, says, "In this world, there are many like me who have killed their emotions. Don't forget that." Prior to all my trauma and depression, this line still hits me pretty hard. I've never been great at expressing emotions in general, and it always sort of burned its way into my head. After suffering all the trauma and depression I felt, this same line hits me like an even bigger shock after 2019. I've really struggled with expressing myself emotionally, especially post-trauma, in various different ways, and this whole game forces me to reflect on my own emotions. It's the first game as a kid I felt emotions and was forced to examine why I felt them, and as an adult it still forces me to feel emotions, forces me to analyze them in a totally different way. The cast, characters, story, and just overall pacing and everything about this game holds up. One of, if not the best RPGs on the Super Nintendo by far. When does a man pay tribute to his empire? I mean, I don't have a literal empire on Twitch or YouTube, but if there was a spawn point where everything started growing for me, it would be Batman the video game. My strange obsession with this game started as a kid, as it was the first game I couldn't beat. Level 5, Firebug and the Joker, back to back, was just all too impossible for me as a kid. It always stayed in the back of my brain as a game that when I got older, I would like to revisit one day and finally beat. I did that on Twitch, almost 10 years ago to the day that this video uploads, and it took 2 hours and 38 minutes. I tried to beat it again the following night, and suddenly it took about an hour, and then the speedrunning clause kinda gripped into me forever. I just like the idea of genuinely getting better at a video game, but learning some of these weird things that these weird speedrunning people did. I think being good at speedrunning is a very different concept than beating something once in a variety sense. If you beat Mario 1 deathless, I mean, that's cool, but everyone can beat Mario 1 deathless at some point, and sometimes you might even get lucky along the way in doing so. So the victory of that might have contained a high amount of luck. The amount of time and effort and strats that you need to force yourself to learn and do and not skip and succeed in getting example for a sub 5 in Mario 1 is vastly not proportional to just beating it once without dying. And I think that's what drew me to speedrunning in the first place. If you wanted a good time in something, you needed to put in the time and effort. You needed to force yourself. You needed to change yourself. And there's just no way to do that in getting lucky and achieving that. Speedrunning is a really cool way to approach a game, and I really feel that still not a lot of people understand the appeal, at least not until they try it. So this was kind of my first experience there as well. Now my best time in this game is 9 minutes 50 seconds. Some of the best people I've ever met on Twitch were from Batman, and beyond that, Batman was one of the first games I remember as a kid feeling genuinely sad when the character died. Batman was both the game I started off Twitch streaming to 0 viewers and what a majority of people maybe met me from as it continued to grow. This game is the epitome of failing as a kid and succeeding as an adult. Something I always wanted to come back to and get better at and did. Something impossible turned possible. And I humbly request, when I'm an old man and I die, please bury me to the stage 4 music in this game. I will never get tired of it for as long as I live and as much as I hear it. So, full disclosure, this could have easily been Street Fighter 2, as Street Fighter 2 is the game that cements my love of fighting games for the rest of my life. I loved everything about the arcade game that led into the Super Nintendo port. I decided to go to Street Fighter 4 as at one point I was top 20 on PSN with the character Seth in North America. And if you think me using Seth is bad, my alternate characters are Blanca and Yoon. That's right, baby! Pretty much 75% of my online matches ended in someone rage quitting against me. Everyone was always like, man, Seth sucks dick. And you wanna know who actually does? Elena, okay? And she was good at it because her hitboxes are trash and she had healing. Oh my god, healing! People back then would send me hate mail via PSN messages saying absolutely unspeakable things that if I repeated in 2026 would get me immediately cancelled on all platforms. In terms of sheer amount of hours played, I've played Street Fighter as a franchise for an ungodly amount of time, spanning the first 5 games, but I haven't tried 6 yet, and in my opinion, Ultra Street Fighter 4 after all the patches ended up being one of the better balanced fighting games in the Street Fighter universe that ever came out. I can still play Ultra Street Fighter 4 all day if given the chance to people, and my love of fighting games still burns immensely strong. I absolutely miss the arcade days or local fight groups where people just play for hours as well. The arcade culture is something that we'll never get back as the internet took off, and the competitive mind games of poking and frame traps and meaties are all something I could talk forever about. Seth Killian, I miss you as a random ass commentator in the EVO universe, and Street Fighter as an entire franchise is still one that I love dearly. Amazing games if you take the time to properly learn them and elevate yourself beyond being a casual scrub. The skill ceiling immediately becomes nearly infinite, and there's nearly an infinite amount to learn and practice. Even if you don't care to become a crazy nerd about it, the entire franchise is just plain fun playing with friends. You get back what you put into in the Street Fighter universe. So, we're also cheating here by picking Pokemon Silver, but realistically Pokemon Red set the stone here for my love of this franchise for the rest of my life. And if we're really splitting hairs, Pokemon X and Y in particular is when I really fell back in love with Pokemon, as 2015 to 2016 was around the same year I got into VGC. I absolutely love Pokemon VGC, which stands for Video Game Championships, and it's one of the deepest, most fun competitive ways to explore a game that, again, a lot of people overlook. I've made over 60 teams and often enjoyed trying extremely anti-meta or cursed ideas. One of the last teams I ended up making was a gravity-based Trick Room team that had 0 IVs for speed, negative speed natures, were bulked and maxed out in EVs when it came to special defense and defense, and they all had access to Fisher, which, with gravity, hit flying opponents. I just tried to Fisher my way to victory. I was a total asshole. If you understood anything about what I just said, you'll understand the absolute magnitude of horrible cursed teams that I've created throughout the years. VGC is something that I could also talk forever about given the opportunity, a hugely deep nerdy passion, and something that again is just a very fun way to explore a franchise that I wish more people got into or gave a chance. Another infinite time sink with another infinite skill ceiling, and a 1 out of 16 chance for lucky crits that will ruin your entire strategy. VGC in Pokemon games is hands down one of my favorite nerd passions, still even to today. And you want to know a secret? I've used Dark Void Smeargle. It was me. I was that guy that you versed on the internet, and I would do it again! It's virtually impossible to explain Diablo in 2026 and the impact it had when it first came out in the 1990s if you weren't there living it yourself. Battle.net was an unworldly experience between people wanting to scam you, rampant hacking, and men pretending to be girls everywhere. LANs weren't completely dead yet, so people often played this game at LAN parties, and the sheer atmospheric music and the mystery this entire game provided was nothing like anything I had ever played before. The simplicity of the theme of Tristram, how terrifying the Butcher was to first stumble upon, and the endless amount of early internet rumors that plagued this game to hell and back. Quite literally. Like whether or not the godly plate of the whale could drop, and once it started appearing in the game, how the hell did it drop? The secret cow level, people automatically killing you. This game was a wild experience from beginning to end, pretty much like the Wild Wild West. And the best part was somehow amidst all the absolute chaos, if you played this game with a friend or a group of friends, it was deeply rewarding and fun. Co-op just catapulted this game to another atmosphere, and it made working together and planning out how to even approach mobs or monsters or certain bosses like 10 times the amount of fun. The evolution of being totally clueless in this world and knowing nothing about it to learning to work together as a team, pre-voice chat, where you had to type everything, was an experience that will never ever be replicated. It's kind of like how Wayne Gretzky played in the right era of hockey. Diablo came out at the perfect time in gaming history. Diablo is another game I could play forever until I'm old and dead, and I probably will play it forever until I'm old and dead. And even though I can objectively admit Diablo 2 is the better game, Diablo 1 will own my heart forever. This is one of the first games that totally sucked me into its world, and I loved every second of it. I remember picking up some kind of network adapter for the PlayStation 2, and I forget what year the hockey game was, but I could use a network adapter to play online at any time against anyone who wanted to play hockey. This is one of my first experiences with online gaming, specifically through a console, and even though it was mind-blowing then at the time, honestly as I get older, I miss the couch co-op from back then. I don't think it really matters what game I put here, whether it's Chip and Dale or Goof Troop or Wild Guns or others. Co-op games with a friend or a significant other almost always tops my list of best games and experiences. Solving puzzles together, sharing a story together, eating together, writing down ideas or thinking together, showing someone something on a controller, smack talking, and just otherwise sharing the experience of a video game with another living person in the same room. Humans are very social by nature, and online gaming has made a lot possible, but there's definitely a simplicity involved with couch co-op that I gravely miss prior to the online boom that has disconnected us a lot as humans. It could just be me as well, as I'm very extroverted, but pretty much everything is better with a friend by your side. I have a really hard time wanting to do anything alone, so if I can always do something with someone, it's better in my books, and that definitely includes video games. Final Fantasy Tactics. What is there to say about this game? This game, to me, is the best game without a doubt that's ever been made and I've ever played before. It's a game that I've gone back to probably the most in my life just because I love playing it so much. The story and the characters are rich, and they explore multiple themes without spoiling anything. I really enjoy. My only recommendation would be to experience it for the first time on the PlayStation 1. As I did go through the remaster and the quality of life stuff is amazing, but at the end of the day, the script in the PlayStation 1 version is still superior to me. This game has evoked so many emotions out of me the first time going through it. It constantly made me think and question right until the end, and the intertwining story between Ramza and Delita is one for the ages. I love everything about this game. If I was on my deathbed and had to give one suggestion, I would whisper Final Fantasy Tactics. If I could somehow erase my memory to enjoy a game again for the first time, it would be Final Fantasy Tactics. If you play one game on my list, it would be Final Fantasy Tactics. Tactics was so good that when I beat it the first time, I immediately replayed it to understand the story better, wondering if there was any branching story paths or anything in the story that I missed at all. My advice is to stick with it. I know it's kind of an overwhelming game to learn and a lot to take in, but I've still never played a better game in my entire life. I love the music, the characters, the themes, the ending. I love the range of emotions that this game has made me feel, from pissed off at the world, to wanting to punch a certain dude literally in the face, to questioning what exactly was moral all along, all the way until the end. I've always put this game on a pedestal, but it's because it belongs on a pedestal. It really is a masterpiece of the game and story, and unlike anything else I've ever experienced in media. The only comparable I have story-wise is Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is an equally phenomenal experience, especially when it comes to morality, and I feel there's a lot of overlapping themes and parallels explored there, despite also being a lot to take in. I think out of all the video games on this list, Final Fantasy Tactics really does stand up against the tides of time. It's as good as it was when it came out, and it shows very little age. And that's about it for me. Thanks for taking the time to learn about me and the video games that I've enjoyed in my life. And thank you all for 1,000 subscribers. I've had a lot of fun on YouTube creating videos and writing scripts and finding my voice a little bit more in each video that I upload. I hope you enjoy me and probably the worst list of 20 games ever compiled of all time. But yeah, thanks for watching. It means a lot as I continue to grow here. I don't really have any recommendations of anything else of mine to watch, so feel free to poke around. Every video that I upload is drastically different from the previous one. It doesn't really follow a theme or structure, so we'll just end on a pretty simple question. What were some of your favorite games?